In the mid-1990s, the United States was riding the wave of economic recovery and technological expansion. Windows 95 had just debuted, transforming how people interacted with computers. The internet was still young, and the dot-com bubble had yet to burst. But amid all that forward-looking momentum, the U.S. Mint remained a steadfast institution, unwavering in its duty to produce the coins that oiled the gears of daily American life. The 1-cent penny, with Abraham Lincoln's stoic profile on its obverse, continued its century-old journey through vending machines, convenience store counters, and children's piggy banks. In 1995, more than 6 billion pennies were struck by the Philadelphia Mint alone, a figure that reinforced the coin's ubiquity and presumed insignificance. But buried in that tidal wave of copper-plated zinc, an imperfection quietly emerged. It was in the press alignment, or rather, a subtle failure of it. For reasons that would not be fully understood for years, one of the obverse dies used in early 1995 production at the Philadelphia facility developed a flaw. Whether due to a mishandled installation or unnoticed shift, it caused a doubling, faint at first glance, but unmistakable under scrutiny, across the word liberty and the motto, "In God We Trust." Unlike the dramatic double-die errors of 1955 or 1972, this one whispered rather than shouted. But once discovered, its significance would echo far louder than anyone expected. Years later, tucked inside a second-hand bookstore in Des Moines, Iowa, a seasoned coin collector named Eva Merrick was leafing through a dusty, unremarkable box labeled "World Coins, $10,000 per jar." Eva had always been drawn to forgotten things, abandoned tokens of commerce, minted by accident, discarded by time. She liked the search more than the prize. It was meditative, unpretentious. That day, she paid for 2 jars, sat cross-legged in her living room, and began sorting, pushing aside foreign francs and Canadian cents until something caught her eye. The shine didn't impress her, it was the date. 1995, she didn't know why, but she paused, she fetched her loupe and focused on Lincoln's profile. The contours were normal, his gaze unflinching. But when she adjusted her angle, she froze. The lettering, specifically, Liberty, seemed to ripple. She blinked. Moved the coin. It rippled again. At first, she suspected machine damage or die fatigue, common flaws that rarely carried value. But something didn't align with that theory. The letters were sharp, both the primary impression and its shadow. Not smeared, but doubled. Purposeful, though unintentional. Her breath shortened, she grabbed her 1995 red book, but it offered no clue. The 1995 double die wasn't listed in any of her printed materials. Confused, she turned to online coin forums, where a few scattered posts described what she had just seen, some dismissed, others met with skepticism. One post mentioned a man in Pennsylvania who claimed to own 3 such coins, found in a bank roll. Another, from a self-proclaimed error coin hunter, simply read, "I think 1995 has something weird. Anyone else seeing it?" That was all. Eva decided to send her coin to a professional grading service, hedging her hopes. The process took longer than she wanted, stretching into weeks. When the coin came back in a protective slab, the label confirmed what her intuition had whispered, 1995 double die obverse, MS65 red. Her heart pounded as she read it again. MS65. Red. Not only genuine, but in near-gem condition. It was the highest grade possible for a coin that had been loosely tumbled in a glass jar for over 2 decades. Collectors began to reach out. A modest offer of $60 turned to $100, then $180 within days. Eva held firm. She wanted to know more. If there were more like hers, why hadn't this error been catalogued earlier? As it turned out, the answer was buried in the sheer volume of 1995 production. With billions of coins flooding out of the mint, subtle errors could vanish in plain sight. Only through collective attention could a pattern emerge. By the time Eva's coin hit online auction forums, others were surfacing. Some lightly circulated, others in mint state. A market slowly began to form. Over the months that followed, Eva tracked the sales closely. One sold for $250 in MS64. Another, in MS66 red, set a temporary record at $450. But what intrigued Eva wasn't just the market value, it was how the value kept changing. Unlike other well-known double-die coins, the 1995 error wasn't immediately famous. Its rarity was hard to measure. Some believed there were only a few hundred. Others suspected the number could climb into the thousands, but scattered and underappreciated. What made the difference was recognition. Coin grading companies began to formally list the error as an official variety. Newer editions of collector guides finally acknowledged it, tucked within the Lincoln cent entries. Yet, despite the growing awareness, no clear total emerged. The mint never issued a statement. No employee recollection or production report revealed the mistake. Its silence fed the mystique. The error's value surged when popular YouTubers and numismatic influencers covered Eva's story, and soon collectors were raiding bank rolls, coin jars, and antique drawers. Everyone wanted to find the next double die, but the twist didn't come until Eva's third coin surfaced. She had been in the habit of examining 1995 pennies wherever she could find them: garage sales, coin shows, charity boxes. She wasn't expecting to find another, but when she did, it took her breath away. Unlike the first two, this one displayed doubling on the date itself. 1995 appeared with a ghostly shadow behind each digit. She immediately compared it to the known error. No mention of this variation existed. She posted a macro photo online. The responses were immediate and polarized. Some claimed it was machine doubling, an unremarkable mechanical bounce that held no real value. But others saw what she saw: distinct separation, not flattening. She sent this third coin for authentication. The wait this time was torturous. When it returned, the label read, 1995 double die obverse, Type 2, MS64 red. Type 2. Not the known variety. A different die. A different error. And possibly the only one of its kind. News spread quickly. Some collectors speculated this coin resulted from a short-lived second die error that had never been identified. If confirmed, it meant the 1995 penny harbored not just one, but at least two separate double die errors, making it the only Lincoln cent year with multiple known obverse doubling varieties in a single mint. This discovery shifted the landscape. Collectors began hunting not just for the original error, but for potential offshoots. The value of Eva's first coin, once casually tossed in a bookstore's coin jar, had risen to over $8,000 at private bidding. The second brought $2,000 due to its superior grade. But the third, her Type 2 error, never sold. Offers came in as high as $15,000, with one museum-backed institution offering long-term display placement. Eva declined. That coin, she believed, was history in metal. Not just rare, but revealing. Its physical characteristics were subtle. The doubling on the date wasn't as bold as the 1955 cent, nor as clear-cut as the famous 1969 yes. But it was distinct. A delicate mirror of the numerals, slightly offset. The 1 and 9 showed the cleanest doubling under low magnification, while the 5 shimmered under angled light. The coin had perfect red surfaces, untouched by circulation. And as word of its uniqueness spread, whispers of a possible third variant began to surface. Could there be a Type 3 yet undiscovered? The possibility consumed collectors. The 1995 double die penny, once ignored, became a symbol. A reminder that not every error makes headlines overnight. Some take years, decades, to bloom. And in that time, they collect not just dust and wear, but stories. Eva's coins, particularly her Type 2, remain among the finest known. They serve as proof that even in a world of precision machinery, human oversight and time can conspire to create art, unintended, but unforgettable. Today, the value of the known 1995 double die pennies continues to climb. Common circulated examples sell for $2,000 to $4,000, while high-grade specimens exceed $10,000 depending on their designation. The Type 2 remains shrouded in mystery, with Eva's specimen the only confirmed example. Whether others exist remains an open question. But every time someone sifts through loose change and pauses at a 1995 penny, they join a silent chase. Not just for metal, but for meaning. For the rare chance that an overlooked object might carry a whisper from the past, waiting patiently to be heard. In the waning months of 1998, amid the rhythmic churn of the Philadelphia and Denver mints, millions of copper-plated zinc pennies clattered down polished chutes and into distribution bins. It was a year like any other, at least on the surface. The United States Mint had long refined its process for creating the humble 1-cent piece, a coin so common that few paused to study its face. Abraham Lincoln's profile, slightly worn by time and touch, remained a constant presence in pockets and jars across the country. Most who handled the 1998 penny wouldn't have given it more than a passing glance, dismissing it as just another echo of mass production. But buried among these coins, hiding in plain sight, was a mistake that would one day provoke the curiosity of collectors and historians alike. The machinery at the mint is often relentless and exact. Presses slam down at lightning speed, dies imprinting precise details with mechanical perfection. Yet even in this regulated ballet of automation, small lapses can manifest. Anomalies, imperfections that sometimes pass unnoticed, can slip through the cracks of quality control. And that's where this story begins, not with a headline or a discovery, but with a quiet defect nestled into a single coin, a defect that would ignite a fervor in the numismatic world years after its birth. For one seasoned collector, William Anders, it all began in the most mundane of places, a flea market table in rural Ohio. William wasn't searching for anything in particular that morning. His eyes drifted lazily across a fold-out table displaying tarnished nickels, Roosevelt dimes dulled by decades, and common wheat pennies sorted by date. It was the familiarity of the 1998 penny roll that made him pause. Not because he expected anything rare, but because of an instinct he'd honed after decades of searching. The roll was priced cheaply, tossed among less interesting items. Something tugged at him. He paid the vendor without bargaining, slid the roll into his bag, and continued browsing. Later that evening, under the warm glow of his desk lamp, William began to examine the coins. The first few pennies looked exactly as expected, ordinary. But halfway through the roll, his fingers stopped. He turned a particular 1998 penny over in his palm, then brought it closer to the magnifier. His breath slowed. The coin's obverse looked typical at first glance. Lincoln stared stoically into the distance. The date read 1998. The D mint mark for Denver was intact. But something was off. Subtle, yes, but unmistakably wrong. As his eyes darted across the reverse side, his heart quickened. There was no sign of the memorial building. Instead, he found an eerie smoothness where the Lincoln Memorial should have stood. He turned the coin again and again, checking for signs of tampering. But the edges were clean, the coloration uniform. And then it hit him. The coin had been struck with a blank reverse, a mule, perhaps, or a one-sided strike. It was, to the untrained eye, a misfit. But to William, it was a whisper from the mint's past, a subtle crack in the mirror of mass production. The emotions came in waves. First, skepticism. Surely he was mistaken. Then excitement. Then, a measured disbelief. He placed the penny into a flip holder and ran comparison checks with known errors in his catalog. He contacted a fellow numismatist in Arizona, and within days, the coin was in transit to a trusted third-party grading service. The weeks that followed were a haze of anticipation, punctuated by sleepless nights and nervous pacing. When the coin returned, encapsulated and certified, the label read, 1998 1C, reverse die cap strike, mint error, MS64. A die cap strike. Not a simple omission, but a technical error resulting from a coin adhering to the hammer die, causing subsequent coins to be struck with a distorted or missing reverse. These types of errors were incredibly rare, and even more so in uncirculated condition. It meant the die had continued striking, damaged and capped, before the issue was detected and corrected. But somehow, This coin had slipped away from the Denver Mint unnoticed, traveling hundreds of miles and into the hands of an Ohio flea market vendor. News spread slowly at first. Only the tightest inner circle of error collectors knew. But as images of the coin began appearing in online forums and newsletters, interest surged. Collectors debated its origin and value. Some argued it could be a fabrication, others pointed out the flawless consistency that only genuine mint errors possess. And as William continued researching, another layer of the mystery began to surface. He wasn't the only one. 2 more coins with eerily similar traits were reported within months, one in Michigan, the other in Texas. Each featured the same smooth, featureless reverse, paired with a normal 1998 D obverse. Speculation boiled over. Could there have been a faulty batch of dies? Was there a malfunction at the Denver Mint that had gone undocumented? Or were these isolated incidents, sheer coincidences amplified by collective obsession? Prices began to shift. What had once been dismissed as a curiosity now commanded serious attention. An early offer of $5,000 from a private buyer was turned down by William. Within 6 months, auction houses were quietly contacting him, hinting at valuations well above $10,000. Yet he held on to the coin. For him, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the pursuit, the thrill of discovery, and the realization that even in a world where billions of pennies circulate, one could still possess the power to rewrite expectations. The market continued evolving. Articles emerged in niche publications, and grading authorities began to reference the 1998 D reverse die cap error in their databases. One appeared at auction and fetched an astonishing $18,700, an amount that sent ripples through the community. Others, spurred by the excitement, began examining their own 1998 D pennies under magnifiers, hoping for lightning to strike again. But it wasn't just the value or the rarity that fascinated collectors. It was the story behind the error, the improbability of its existence. How could such a severe strike error escape unnoticed in an era of advanced quality controls? And then, a twist. An anonymous former Mint employee stepped forward, anonymously posting on a numismatic message board. They claimed that in late 1998, a maintenance incident involving the reverse die press had temporarily compromised the stamping process. A misaligned planchet had adhered to the reverse die and wasn't removed for several cycles. During this window, a small number of coins were struck with an altered or blank reverse. Though supervisors caught the issue quickly, a few coins had already made it into the standard distribution batches. The Mint never acknowledged the error publicly. According to the source, it was quietly corrected without escalation. The revelation, though unverifiable, sparked deeper intrigue. If true, it explained the extremely limited number of error coins in circulation. It also suggested there may be a few more still undiscovered, resting quietly in coin jars or forgotten rolls across the country. Collectors began to speculate on the potential maximum number of such coins. Some estimated only 4 or 5 might exist. Others dared to believe 10 or more could still be out there. And as with all things rare and unexplained, myth began to surround the 1998 D penny. Rumors circulated of a collector who had unknowingly spent one at a convenience store. Another tale told of a young girl who had traded one in a school penny drive, never realizing its hidden worth. Meanwhile, the value of authenticated examples continued to rise. By 2021, an MS-65 specimen was listed in a private sale for $32,000. And yet, in an ironic twist, a second identical error penny, also from 1998 but lacking the D mint mark, surfaced briefly before disappearing into a private collection. This raised eyebrows. If the error had occurred at Denver, how could one exist without the mint mark? Was it a Philadelphia strike? Could there have been a similar mechanical failure in both mints? Or, more provocatively, was one of them a modern counterfeit? That uncertainty only fueled more demand. The original Denver specimen, Williams coin, remained the benchmark. Auction houses considered it the discovery piece, and its pedigree became as important as its flaw. When it finally changed hands in 2023, the transaction was done discreetly, with no fanfare. Only whispers in collector circles revealed the final figure $48,200. But the coin's story didn't end there. In a display of poetic symmetry, the buyer turned out to be the same man who had sold the original roll at the flea market years earlier. He'd learned of the coin's fame only after stumbling across a YouTube video showcasing the top 10 rare Lincoln cent errors. There, at number 3, was an image of the coin he had once dismissed as common, sold for pennies on the dollar. Haunted by regret, he tracked down William and negotiated a quiet reacquisition. What makes the 1998 penny error so enduring is not just its rarity, nor its price. It is the quiet way in which it challenges assumptions. That in a world where billions of identical coins are produced with machine-like precision, a single flawed piece can slip through and upend expectations. It reminds us that even the smallest artifacts, when touched by anomaly and time, can become vessels of mystery and value. That sometimes, treasure hides not in golden hoards or antique vaults, but in the copper coin you least expect. In 1984, the United States was in the midst of cultural change and political evolution. The Cold War cast long shadows, the economy was recovering from recession, and a young generation was finding its voice in the face of technological progress. Through it all, the U.S. Mint continued its routine work, striking billions of coins, including the modest 1-cent piece bearing Abraham Lincoln's enduring profile. Pennies, by then, had been transformed into copper-plated zinc compositions, lighter and cheaper than their earlier copper counterparts. At first glance, the 1984 Lincoln cent blended seamlessly into the background of countless others, unremarkable, mass-produced, fleeting. But amid the flood of uniformity, a mistake took form. Quiet. Unintentional. Hidden, the Philadelphia Mint was particularly busy that year, striking more than 8 billion Lincoln cents. In such an environment, even the slightest error could easily be missed. It wasn't until decades later that one such anomaly would be unearthed, not by a historian or archivist, but by a blue-collar worker in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had never given much thought to coins beyond their spending power. His name was Earl Denning, a man more acquainted with steel than zinc, who lived simply and kept an old coffee tin full of pocket change in his garage. On a rainy Sunday afternoon in 2001, Earl's wife asked him to roll up coins to exchange for grocery money. With the sound of the rain drumming on the roof, Earl sat at the kitchen table, sorting penny after penny into paper wrappers. It was then that something caught his eye, a 1984 penny that seemed wrong. He couldn't say why. The face of Lincoln seemed odd, like it had been pressed too hard, almost swollen in one area. He turned it over, saw the familiar Lincoln Memorial, but something still felt off. He set it aside. Over the next week, that single penny lingered in Earl's mind. Eventually, on the advice of a neighbor who dabbled in coin collecting, Earl took the coin to a local coin shop. The man behind the counter squinted through a loop, then looked up slowly. "Sir," he said, "you might have something pretty special here." That was the moment everything began to shift. The error was confirmed as a double die obverse, an extremely rare and visually dramatic anomaly. On closer inspection, the details were unmistakable. Lincoln's ear appeared doubled, almost as if two outlines were pressed into the coin. The profile of his face exhibited subtle yet visible signs of duplication, especially near the jaw and neck. Even the "Liberty" inscription showed faint doubling. To the casual observer, it might have gone unnoticed. But to a trained eye, it was a revelation. The doubling was the result of a die that had misaligned during the hubbing process, creating a doubled image on the coin's obverse. And though most double die errors are minor or unimpressive, this particular variant was bold and clean enough to elevate it into numismatic significance. Experts noted that it wasn't just a matter of design aesthetics, it was a testament to a rare lapse in minting standards. Word spread quickly. Forums lit up with speculation. Collectors who had searched for years to find their own 1984 double-die Lincoln cent began posting comparisons and photos. Yet, what made Earl's coin more astonishing wasn't just its clear doubling, it was its condition. Graded by a leading authentication company, it was deemed mint state 66 red. A miracle of preservation, especially for a coin that had tumbled loosely in a coffee tin for nearly 2 decades. The error began to gain traction. earning its place among the elite double-die cents, a lineage that included the famed 1955 and 1972 versions. But unlike those, the 1984 double-die had never been mass-hyped. Its rarity was amplified by mystery: how many truly existed? Estimates varied. Some guessed a few thousand had been struck before the die was replaced. Others believed far fewer ever escaped into circulation. And of those, only a fraction survived in high grades. The coin's rise in value was slow but steady. In 2005, a Mint State 64 specimen sold $4.35,000 at auction. By 2009, that figure had doubled. Earl, however, never sold his coin. For him, it wasn't about the money. It became a story he told proudly, about how a coin saved from a roll nearly spent on cereal and milk turned out to be one of the rarest errors of the modern penny. In 2013, a twist emerged that reignited interest. A second coin, graded MS-67, surfaced at a California coin show. The dealer had picked it up in a collection of old pocket change brought in by a high school teacher. The coin's sharp doubling and vibrant red luster stunned attendees. Bidding wars broke out almost instantly, even before the coin officially hit the auction block. That specimen sold privately 2 weeks later for a rumored $42,000, though the buyer and seller both declined public confirmation. It was then that a quiet hunt began across the country. Coin roll hunters, metal detectorists, and casual collectors started poring over their 1984 pennies with new fervor. For many, it was a game of chance. Yet each year, another coin or two came to light, authenticated and preserved, adding to the slowly growing but still very exclusive list. Then came 2018, a year that would add an unexpected chapter to the story. A man named Carlos Eddington, who worked as a janitor at a Midwestern university, found himself browsing a thrift store one afternoon. As he waited in line, he noticed a small bowl of coins near the register, priced at 5 cents apiece. He idly picked through the pile and purchased 10 random pennies, curious more out of boredom than intent. Among them was a worn but intact 1984 cent. Carlos tossed the coins into a drawer and forgot about them for 2 years. It wasn't until 2020, during lockdown boredom, that Carlos stumbled upon a YouTube video about valuable penny errors. He retrieved the drawer, casually glanced at the 1984 cent, and then froze. There it was. The doubled ear, the shadowed letters, the unmistakable signs he now knew how to identify. What followed was a blur of authentication, phone calls, and disbelief. His coin, despite light circulation, graded at MS-63 brown, a lower grade than previous gems, but still extraordinarily rare. That coin sold for $17,200 in early 2021. For Carlos, the experience was life-changing. It allowed him to pay off debt, move into a better apartment, and buy a used car. But more than that, it lit a fire across social media. The 1984 double die wasn't just a collector's item, it was a modern-day treasure hunt. By 2024, the coin had taken on a legendary status. The market saw fluctuations, but prices continued to rise steadily for high-grade examples. Major auction houses began listing the coin alongside more storied rarities. Collectors began to refer to it by a shorthand, the 84 ear. And as with many rare coins, stories began to circulate that blurred the lines between fact and myth. One tale described a Texas man who unknowingly used a pristine specimen to buy a pack of gum. Another spoke of a child who added one to a coin collection board without ever knowing its value. What gives the 1984 double die its enduring appeal is its subtlety. Unlike coins with missing designs or off-center strikes, this error hides in plain sight. Only the observant, or the lucky, will ever spot it. Its quiet distortion offers no dramatic flair, yet its implications are vast. It reminds collectors that even in the most ordinary objects, extraordinary secrets can hide. Today, the 1984 US 1-cent penny error holds an estimated value ranging from $50,000 to $110,000 for high-grade, sharply doubled specimens. Its value lies not only in its scarcity, but in the story of everyday people discovering treasure where they least expect it, in pocket change, in thrift stores, in dusty drawers long forgotten. The 1984 penny proves that in the vast sea of copper and zinc, sometimes one coin can change everything. In the year 2014, America stood deep in the digital age. Smartphones buzzed in every pocket, self-driving cars crept closer to mainstream, and the average citizen found themselves increasingly detached from the physical currency that once dominated their every transaction. The penny, long regarded as the smallest denomination of U.S. currency, was under constant debate. Some questioned its relevance, others defended its legacy. But as attention drifted toward electronic payment methods and crypto investments, few noticed the quiet misstep that occurred at the United States Mint that year. A mistake so subtle, it would remain buried in obscurity until an inquisitive teenage girl stumbled upon it years later. Minting in 2014 was standard in every regard. Billions of 1-cent coins were struck, all bearing the shield reverse introduced in 2010 and the iconic Lincoln bust on the obverse. The Mint's facilities in Philadelphia and Denver moved like clockwork, their massive presses calibrated to near perfection. But in systems that rely on unbroken repetition, perfection often masks vulnerability. All it takes is one small deviation, a fraction of a second misaligned, and a mistake is born, not a dramatic one, but enough to leave behind a ghost of error. That's precisely what happened during one of the lesser-documented die changes at the Denver Mint in mid-2014. The consequences of that moment would remain invisible for nearly 5 years. In 2019, Ellie Hart, a 16-year-old from rural Kansas with a hobby for crafts and collecting old coins, began sorting through a gallon jar of pennies her grandfather had saved over the years. Most of the coins she examined were dusty, brown, and unremarkable. But then she noticed one that had a strange shimmer when the light hit it. It was a 2014 D penny. She examined it with the small magnifying glass her grandfather had given her when she was 6. Something didn't make sense. The date looked off, not because it was incorrect, but because the 2 in 2014 looked faint, almost like it had been ghosted behind itself. Lincoln's bust had a strange doubling around the bow tie, and the letters "In God We Trust," had the faintest shadow. Not knowing what she was looking at, Ellie snapped a few pictures and posted them in a coin-collecting Facebook group she had quietly followed for months. The response was nearly immediate. Dozens of comments poured in, ranging from mild curiosity to intense excitement. A few experts requested clearer photos. One private message offered her $200 on the spot, without any authentication. But one collector, a retired metallurgist named Frank Delgado, insisted she send it to a grading service. He even offered to cover the submission fee. Sensing something important, Ellie and her grandfather agreed. Weeks passed. Then came the call. The coin had been authenticated and graded as a Mint State 65 red. But more importantly, it was labeled as a 2014 D obverse double die, strong class 4 doubling, an error previously undocumented in any major coin registry. Ellie had discovered the first known specimen. The doubling was strongest around the profile of Lincoln's face and particularly striking near the ear and jawline. Experts speculated that it occurred due to a rare hub misalignment during die creation, a misalignment so minimal it escaped detection in quality control, yet strong enough to leave visible doubling under magnification. Unlike more dramatic die clashes or off-center strikes, this doubling whispered rather than screamed, which only made it more intriguing to advanced collectors. The announcement of the coin certification caused a ripple effect. Coin forums lit up with debate, speculation, and excitement. Ellie was interviewed by a numismatic podcast, and her story was picked up by a local newspaper. Collectors who had once ignored post-2010 pennies began checking their 2014 D coins obsessively. Within 6 months, 2 more examples of the error surfaced, one in Oregon and another in Wisconsin. Both were in lower grades, but the doubling was clearly present. It confirmed the error's legitimacy and bolstered Ellie's coin's position as the discovery piece. Auction houses began watching. In 2020, one of the lower-grade examples, an MS-62, sold quietly for $9,000 at a regional auction. That sale ignited fresh interest, and soon high-end collectors began offering private bids for Ellie's MS-65. One offer reached $25,000. Then $32,000. She held off. In 2021, the coin was displayed at the American Numismatic Association's annual convention in Chicago. It sat in a sleek case with a plaque, 2014 D1C, Discovery Coin, Obverse Double Die. Lines formed around it. Attendees leaned in close to see the gentle distortions that had evaded millions of other eyes. There was something surreal about a 2014 penny, an otherwise forgettable coin, drawing such attention among rows of 19th-century gold and colonial rarities. But the story, the anomaly, the unexpectedness of it all, gave it weight far beyond its face value. That year, another twist surfaced. A fourth example appeared, this time, from a collector in Arizona who had received the coin in change at a grocery store. The collector had initially dismissed it as a common penny but spotted the doubling thanks to an online video inspired by Ellie's story. The Arizona coin graded at MS64 and sold for $18,600 in early 2022. Each new discovery added to the legend but also to the mystery. How many were out there? Most believed the doubling occurred only in a very limited number of strikes, perhaps during a single production run before the damaged die was replaced. The error had likely occurred over the course of mere minutes before it vanished into the endless river of pennies the mint produced that year. Speculation on the total surviving population remains conservative. Fewer than a dozen are believed to exist, with only a small handful reaching mint state red condition. This rarity, and the story of how it was discovered by someone so unlikely to even be aware of error coins, has made the 2014 D obverse double die a sort of modern legend in numismatic circles. In 2023, Ellie's original coin finally went to auction. The bidding was intense and, at times, personal. Two collectors who had been chasing the coin for over a year went back and forth, neither willing to let it go. When the hammer finally fell, the coin sold for $77,500, an astounding figure for a modern Lincoln cent and a life-changing sum for Ellie, who used the proceeds to begin a college fund and support her grandfather's medical care. Today, the 2014 US 1-cent penny error, especially the double die variety from the Denver Mint, sits quietly at the top of modern penny lore. Its current value fluctuates depending on grade and market demand but ranges comfortably between $$35,000 and $$85,000 for high-grade certified examples. More than a minting mistake, it has become a symbol of overlooked value, a reminder that in a world of digital wealth and instant transactions, sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries still lie in the most ordinary places. A single cent, forgotten in a jar, became a window into history, a puzzle of precision gone awry, and for one teenage girl, the start of a remarkable journey.